Hey there, welcome back to High Infidelity, the best channel for cheating stories. Like and subscribe to channel for more spicy stories. Now, let's get into today's story video.
My 29 male ex-fiance, 29 female, cheated on me 4 years ago. I picked myself up and came back stronger than ever. Part 1. This happened some time ago, but I thought I'd share it in the hopes of showing people who have been destroyed by infidelity that your world is not over and that things can only get better from here on out. Disclaimer. Names and some minor details have been changed for identity protection purposes. I met my ex-fiance, let's call her Jane, 7 years ago in a coffee shop. I was standing behind her in a long, slow-moving queue, and we just started talking. We hit it off immediately and even sat and drank out coffee together for about an hour. We eventually exchanged numbers before going our separate ways. At first, I was very hesitant to get serious with her because I had just started as an analyst at a large investment bank and the hours were absolutely brutal. Think 70 to 80 hours a week when things were slow, and up to 120 plus when we were on live deals. I had also heard many relationship horror stories from my fellow junior colleagues about how all of their relationships had failed due to the crushing hours and not being able to see their SOs on a consistent basis. However, after a few dates with Jane, it was clear that I was falling for her and that she had felt the same way about me. I brought up my concerns about my work hours causing our relationship to fail, and she told me that she really liked me, how it would be a shame if we didn't even try, and that if we stayed committed and were understanding towards one another, any storm could be weathered. She was true to her word. The next 3 years were filled with Everest like highs and a hellish lows, but we persevered. She was patient and understanding and never made me feel guilty about all the super late nights spent at work and not with her. She showered me with love, care, and affection, and often told me how grateful she was to be with an amazing person like me. I, in turn, did everything humanly possible to love her like she deserved to be loved. To everyone's surprise, after the end of this 3 year period, we were going stronger than ever whilst all my fellow analysts' relationships crumbled and burnt. During this period, I decided that the time was right for me to start recruiting for private equity roles. If successful, my hours would be drastically reduced and my already insanely high pay would increase even further. I also decided that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Jane, this amazing woman who had stuck with me even through my sucky banking years as a junior. I bought a ring and proposed to her while we were on vacation in Spain. She said yes, and I was on top of the world. Now, this is the part where everything goes to shit. She was in the shower one day and had left her phone on the bedside table. I had just the slightest urge to snoop. At this point, she had done nothing at all that would lead me to suspect that she was cheating, and I had had no gut feelings that something was up and whatnot. I just had a slight urge, and it's not like she was ever gonna find out that I snooped. Long story short, I snooped and I found a name, female, in her chats that I don't recognize. I clicked in, and that I saw simultaneously enraged me and broke my heart. Lots of sweet nothings, nudes, etc., even some texts of them comparing the size of my manhood to his. What made all of this worse was that he looked to be taller than me and was far better looking than me. I am 5'9" and only slightly above average in the looks department. I was shaking quite badly and feeling so sick that I put the phone down and went out to have a breather. My thoughts were racing as I strolled down the pavement. My first thought was that maybe this was my fault, and that she just wanted to feel loved and I couldn't give her as much attention as she needed due to my work. Pathetic, right? I wanted to confront her when I got back, but I was afraid to because I loved her dearly and my confronting her might ruin us. My thoughts continued running wild, ranging from, hey, this isn't that bad, right? It's just a couple of texts. It's not like they had you just have to put a little more effort and she'll love you again, to how dare she do something so disgusting to you behind your back. I ultimately decided that I needed more proof before making a decision, as if the texts weren't enough. I went and bought a small camera and hid it among some stuff atop a shelf in the corner of our bedroom. I activated it the next day before going to work. Later that night, around 10, I activated the camera and saw exactly what I was hoping not to, but expecting to see her getting railed by the guy that she was on her phone. All hopes of reconciliation and any love that I still had for her was thrown out of the window instantly. I threw up in the bathroom and immediately left the office for my best friend's, let's call him Owen, house, where I broke down and cried harder than I've ever cried in my 25 years of existence. When I had calmed down, me and Owen sipped on stiff scotch and planned my next move after I was done venting. We talked throughout the night until the next morning when we both had to leave for work. He suggested that I don't confront and end my engagement to Jane outright, but instead act cordial around her until I had found a new job, hopefully in private equity, and a new flat, then block her phone, email, and on all forms of social media, etc., and move out while she's at work. One day, I'd be kissing her goodbye in the morning, and next, I'd be gone like I'd never existed. That would hit her like a truck, he told me. I was 100% on board with this plan, but I told him that I'd prefer to move to a whole new continent, probably New York, where I'd truly be gone. He told me he'd miss me if I did so, but if that was what I felt was necessary, he'd support my decision. I trudged into work like a zombie later that day, but the massive weight weighing me down had been lifted considerably. I gave the same answer to the hordes of mutual friends and family who were now calling to wish us congratulations. I broke down in the office toilet a few times late at night, knowing she was probably sleeping with AP at that very moment. It was a miracle that I managed to hold out for as long as I did. Me staying at the office as late as possible, or just walking around the city when I finished earlier than usual helped. Meanwhile, I was reaching out to headhunters in New York, hoping to recruit for private equity associate roles there while simultaneously studying for their LBO modeling tests. I had also told my other close friends what I was planning to do, and they all told me they'd support me 100% no matter what I decide. After a few weeks of interviews with headhunters, I had a few interviews with a New York based private equity firms lined up. Everything was going just as planned, but this isn't a fantasy world. This is life. And life soon threw me a curveball that shattered my plan completely, but not in the way that you might be thinking. I went out with Owen and another one of my friends. Let's call him Antoine. One Friday night, and we ended up mingling with a group of people that Antoine knew. Among them was one of the most beautiful girls I had ever seen. I talked to her for a bit and we got on well. Her name was Alyssa, and she was absolutely stunning and looked like Elsa Hosk. She wasn't like Elsa Hosk's identical twin. If you put them both side by side, you'd know who was Elsa and who was Elisa, but you'd get what I mean. We had a lot in common. Namely, she was doing her master's at my alma mater, and as a matter of fact, was doing the exact same program that I did, and that we had both grown up in Asia. I was planning to jet off to New York ASAP, but I just couldn't resist exchanging numbers with her. We ended up going on a few dates and sleeping together. I had never felt this wanted and understood by anyone before, not even by Jane in the early stages of our relationship. And for the first time in weeks, I was genuinely happy. One night after sleeping together, we confided in each other our deepest feelings. She brought up how she was cheated on by her ex. I didn't prompt her, and how she hated and had absolutely no respect for infidels. I then explained to her my current situation and she laughed. Not at me, but in amusement and in awe at how I was going to drop a sledgehammer on Jane. She then asked me if there was any chance that I would stay and not leave to New York. I said I would consider it, but deep down, I no longer wanted to leave. I, of course, had no intention of getting involved with anyone but Alyssa, was just so amazing, and I couldn't help but fall for her. Her views on infidelity also somewhat reassured me that she wouldn't ever betray me in such a horrible way like Jane did, should we end up together. What a massive curveball she was. Now, some may say this is cheating on Jane, and I'm just as evil as her now. I disagree with the former because she cheated first, so from that point on, I had no obligation to remain faithful to her any longer. I agree with the latter. I am a savage.